Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dr. Ike, and this is Growing with Dr. Ike. So, this week I wanted to talk about achievement as armor as it relates to the eldest daughters. Now, you may be saying, how are their achievements armor? You ask great questions. So, the first thing I need you to know is never tell an eldest daughter that she's smart. You know why? Because she knows that, and that's not a compliment. And from the moment they came earthside, they were only looked at for their labor. I've told you once before that the eldest daughter, the birth order 1, represents productivity. So they came earthside solely to move the family forward. Now, when I'm talking about the eldest daughters in this context, I want you to realize that I'm talking about from a dysfunctional family system. But the birth order 1 does still represent productivity. The problem is, in a dysfunctional family system, all the eldest daughter is seen for is her labor. And in her real life as an adult, one of her most tumultuous relationships is with work. One of which is because her achievements hung on how she got her needs met. Now, you may be asked, well, how is that? You ask great questions. See, most eldest daughters, when they were younger, they were never seen for their personhood. They were seen for being smart. They were seen for being the one who could figure things out, the problem solvers. I mean, think about it. When you look at the world, most of high positions are held by eldest daughters. If you were to do a poll, you would find most doctor, dentists, CEO, SVPs, people who sit in C suites, ironically, are eldest daughters. You would be surprised that they do so well because they have learned at a very early age how to problem solve. Now, you may be saying, okay, Dr. Ike, well, how did they learn that? They learned it by managing the emotions of adults, and particularly their fathers. See, the backdrop of the family dynamic that they grew up in was rooted in patriarchy, and particularly religion. And in that environment, you had two adults, one of which was a man, a father, a spouse, a partner, who had a complicated relationship with patriarchy. And he funneled all of that down to her mother, and her mother funneled it down to her. This is the catch, though. The father was normally not doing what he needed to do. So, in turn, the eldest daughter took his spot. That's why oftentimes the eldest daughter is often in her masculine energy. But what she learned very early was that in order to get any head nod, any approval, any validation of any sort, she had to be doing something. But when she was younger, she quickly disassociated and got out of her body because her environment disrupted her nervous system. Whether she was coming up in a situation where there was poverty, whether she was coming up in an environment where there was domestic violence, whether she was coming up in an environment where it was a lot of conflict, she had to quickly begin to understand, how am I going to navigate this situation with one, protecting my siblings, and sometimes even protecting her mom from her poor choices in partners. So, what you have to learn is that achievement became the eldest daughter's armor early on in life. It was the way she prided herself on navigating certain spaces. Now, let me be clear. It's not that that is what she hangs her hat on. It's how she was able to navigate spaces and get ahead in life. Now, the caveat is the eldest daughter often doesn't know how to communicate her feelings. You would never know it though, because that's not what people see when they see her. They don't necessarily see that. What they see is someone who's competent, who's able, who can get the job done, who everybody comes to for all their problems. But it's not because she's always good with dealing with emotions, meaning I see you struggling or I care about you. That's the obvious. It really is. She's a problem solver. She understands that there's something that needs to be done and I can do it. Now, this is the problem. Even though she's made achievement her armor, it is also a barrier for her in life because she doesn't understand that her relationship with work is toxic, that people never see her for who she is, but what she can do. And in the back of her mind, for some eldest daughters, they don't even recognize that. They actually hang their hat on it and they're like, good, I just get another promotion, another raise. But she's often never fulfilled. One of which is because she's only seen for her labor. But she has never realized that a lot of her jobs and professions are nothing but a makeshift template of her own family dynamic. That's why you'll find most eldest daughters, they struggle with having boundaries at work, knowing how to take time off, knowing how to prioritize themselves, even advocate for themselves. Because you got to remember, they only got their needs met when they were doing what someone needed them to do. They only got their needs met or got seen or validated by virtue of their labor, whether it was taking care of a sibling, whether it was taking care of a parent. And a fun fact, a lot of eldest daughters grew up having parents who were sick. So they came into their relationship with their parents by being caregivers. Imagine what it's like to grow up, not have a childhood, not because you aren't able to have a childhood, but because you're responsible for a parent who is sick or who has limitations and they happen to be a single parent, or if they have a partner there, their spouse isn't very helpful. So now the burden falls on the most vulnerable of the bunch, which is usually the most temperamental of the bunch, and it's usually the eldest daughter. Now, you would never know that because in your mind, you would think, I always picture eldest daughters to be tough. As a matter of fact, I may even say that some eldest daughters are kind of mean. All smoke and mirrors. Their achievements are their armor. And to you, you may say, well, they're so serious. They had to be. They had to get things done because if anything slipped through the crack, something could have happened to their siblings, to them, to their parent, in particular their mother. See, you're looking at the eldest daughter as someone who has it all together. No, what you see is her armor behind the achievements, which is ultimately just her labor mirrored back to you and to the world as a way to say, this is my pathway to survival. It's almost a coping mechanism. Now, you may be saying, well, how does she get out of that? You ask great questions. The reality of it is a lot of eldest daughters don't even recognize what they're doing. They recognize in theory that they have an over-functioning problem as it relates to productivity. They're high achievers. And some of them, even as they know it, they find it almost addicting. But what they don't realize is every time they continue to operate like that, they amputate more and more of their identity. And then what you'll find is that they get so overwhelmed and they wonder why people always call on them. They wonder why people never check on them. They wonder why they're always the one that is made to be feel like they're responsible for things. No one ever calls the other siblings. They always call them. They're frustrated about that. But what they don't realize is most of their lives, they never were allowed to exist in their humanity. They never were allowed to exist as a person, as a human being. But what they did exist as a machine. Now, you may be saying, now, Dr. Ike, that's kind of harsh. It's the truth. When you think about most eldest daughters, they operate like machines. You know the ones. You call them right now. You have an issue, Jilly on the spot. They'll handle it. But very rarely do you ever seek to think that they themselves are more than just what they do. So, The next time that you think about an eldest daughter, and you may work with them, you may be married to one, you may even be one. I want you to ask yourself, if your achievements didn't exist as an extension of your labor, who would you be? And what would you want to be known for? Eldest daughters are extraordinary human beings. And as I continue to teach you about them, you'll see. It's not to say anything against all the other birth orders because all of them are unique. But what I need you to know about the eldest daughter is that she is more than her labor. She is more than what she can do. She is more than what she knows. She is more than the resources that she has because of what she has acquired over the years. She is more than her expertise. She is a feeling, thinking, emotional human being that cries, that gets upset, that's frustrated, that sometimes doesn't even know what you think she knows. But she can't tell you that because you would never believe it. But just know that she too is wanting somewhere to put it down and just be seen as normal and not for her labor and definitely a machine. So, until next time, be good to yourself. And most importantly, if you know an eldest daughter, check in on her and tell her you love her. All right. Until next time. Thanks for watching.